Today's show is sponsored by the 2019 season of Savage Race. Typically around this time of year, Savage sends me some new copy to read, and then I add my own, personal flair as I do for the host read, as they're called here in podcast land. But you know what? I'm going 1,000% MBD on this one because I love Savage Race. I've been running Savages since 2012. They know me by first name. They know my kids by first name. First of all, Savage takes the cake for the We Care Award. They put on great races, and you can feel that love, but also if there's ever been any issues, they always take care of it. They always take care of their customer. I just love how they do that. They continue to innovate. Every year they throw at least a couple new obstacles in there. They're super fun. I really love Savage Race. This year, they're up in the game on the Blitz. That's their new short course, so you can win the classic Savage distance race on Saturday, then the short course on Sunday to double up. Ladies and gentlemen, I love Savage Race. Please go check out their races. Everyone says, oh, they won't come to the West Coast. You know why? Because they're not idiots. They can't just move overnight across the country. It's expensive. We all know what happened to the last company that tried to do that. This could be the longest host read ever. I love Savage Race. Check out SavageRace.com.
Yeah! Get up!
Welcome to the Obstacle Racing Media Podcast with Matt B. Davis.
With over 300 episodes since 2012, Matt has produced the most consistent podcast in OCR.
Each episode, Matt speaks with race directors, athletes, and industry insiders to bring you the most in-depth interviews and conversations in the world of obstacle racing,
adventure runs, and ultra marathons. If you have small children nearby, now is the time to put on some headphones
or send them off to watch Phineas and Ferb, as there are occasionally four-letter words,
which are not bleeps. Now, here is your host.
Now here is your goddamn host.
Now here's your host, fucking Matt B. Davis.
Good day, everyone. Welcome back to the Obstacle Racing Media Podcast. I am your host, Matt B. Davis. Welcome back. It's another week. Hey, first off, let's thank those people that get the weekly shout out on the Patreon. That's Bethany Schimmer, Christian Michael, Patrick Bown, Charlotte Engelman. She's new. Welcome, Charlotte. David Cantu, Eric Marin, Steve Rye, Sophia Harnedy, Scott Sebastian, Eric Wilkin, Dave Claxton, Sean Rombo, and Brad to the Heilwagon. Ladies and gentlemen, Patreon is a way for you to support content creators like myself if you're liking what we're doing. So if you appreciate all these podcasts, all these videos, all these articles, lots came out in the last couple weeks. We had the fun money update. People seem to like that. People found out what people are making, the top folks in OCR. That was nice. People really seem to enjoy, much to Jack Bauer's surprise, people really enjoyed the Jack Bauer hour-long chat into the numbers and the placements and the whatnot. And of course, the podcast, which answered many questions but created a few more, the episode about the point system for qualifying for Tahoe. You can listen to all of those on this feed. If you're new, welcome, and you need some help navigating, just drop me a line. I'm happy to help. We do a lot of stuff here as the news happens and news breaks. For example, last Friday, we got contacted by this new guy at Terrain, and so we wrote an article about that. Boom, that happened. And things just happen sometimes like that. But what you can count on is a new episode from me every Tuesday on this podcast channel. And then the new Obstacle Discourse with Davis and Chase looks like every Thursday, a little somewhere between 10 and 20-minute chat about news of the week. And then all the fun videos that we do. We just do a lot of stuff here. If you're new, find us on all the various channels. Obstacle Racing Media on Instagram, a lot of fun stuff happens. Just welcome to the crazy world of obstacle racing. I always assume we have such long-time listeners, but many of you, there's always a first time, right? On today's episode, Deven Yanko. Ladies and gentlemen, Deven Yanko was supposed to do World's Toughest this past year. That's when I first reached out to her, and that did not happen. And then in the meantime, our friend Heather over at Overcome and Run did a nice interview with her, which I listened to and appreciated. And so I thought, she's a very experienced ultra runner. She's coming over into our world, as it were, and we welcome that. And I love to talk to those people and see what they're thinking and how I can help them sort of come into this world. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of her accomplishments and what she's up to. And I try, my best not to cover the stuff that, she's been on probably 100 podcasts. There are a lot of ultra running podcasts. So I do this the way I know how to do it. And so I think there's not much else to say other than let's dig in. We had a nice chat on the old Skype-a-roo. Away we go. I think we should just talk about banking and accounting for the rest of this call.
Hey, I got plenty to say. I mean, I run a business, so I could give you all the stories.
What were you doing before you owned a bakery?
I was a personal chef for a while, but I only became a personal chef because the economy tanked, which sounds weird, but rich people still had money.
Rich people always have money.
They always have money. So I had been working as a librarian. I have a master's in library and information science. And basically those jobs, went away. And the company I was working for laid me off. And so I was like, well, I have this personal chef's certificate that I did for myself just so I could, fuel myself with good food. And so I just decided to give it a try, and it was a really good gig. I mean, I only had like 4 clients, and that paid me a full-time salary, and that was fun.
My wife is a really good cook, and it led her to start cooking for people. But my wife is not a business person. I'm doing air quotes for the listening audience. And unlike me, who is and wants to learn and get better at those things, it's not her deal. So it never quite worked out. Basically, she'd end up with a couple of clients that weren't paying enough, and then so they'd go away, and then she'd get the next round of people, and then she'd raise her rates. But then, if you're gonna grow a business, you gotta feed the beast, right? So like, be on social and write stuff, and which she would be and is great at, but it never really happened, and it took some of the fun out of it for her. Because she's one of those people that literally anybody that comes over goes, "This is amazing," and she just does it she just does it, which amazes a guy like me who can cook like eggs.
I mean, the business side is not for everybody. Like, I think a lot of people, whenever I say I own a bakery, people just vomit. I want to own a bakery. Like, that's what they say. And I'm like, you have no idea what you're talking about. Do you like getting up at 3:00 in the morning? And they're like, oh, you have to get up at 3:00 in the morning? And I'm like, what time do you want your pastry? You want it at 7 a.m., don't you? And you want it fresh out of the oven. And so, I think that's the difference. Especially in the food industry, you see a lot of people, actually, our space that we took over from somebody who had a lot of money and liked the idea, and they spent like $1.2 million on a build out. And then the reality of running the business, they were just like, oh, heck no. They lasted like a year because when you own your own business, it's mostly not the fun part of why you go into it. It's not necessarily the passion part. You have to do all of the nuts and bolts. You have to deal with accounting and getting people to pay you and marketing yourself and all of that stuff, which for most people is not something they're super keen on.
Well, nowadays it is very easy to do stuff like I do, right? To create a website, to create video content, to create podcasts, to run a social media account. And, so many people start it, and I stopped worrying about the competition a long, long time ago because nobody sticks it out. It's as short as a few weeks to 6 months to a year, and they go, wait, not making money, required to do a lot of work. I'm going to go back to my job, or they never left their job per se. But it's like anything. Nothing happens overnight, and it's a lot. I'm in podcast groups, and I have to kind of start usually for technical help, right? Which is great. I can't figure out this software issue, blah, blah, blah. But over and over and over again, it's, hey, I just spent $5,000 on equipment. What should I do my show about? Right? Right? Maybe the order of that's wrong. Maybe. Hey, I started a few months ago. I can't really grow any listeners. How do I do that? And how do I get advertisers? And I just, people say what they say, and I always say the same thing. I say, well, you're going to have to do it consistently and put out great stuff for a really long time. And if people don't come after a couple years and you don't still just love it to do it, then stop doing it. Because that's really your option.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, people don't, I think we glorify failure in a lot of ways, but a lot of people don't want to get anywhere close to what it takes to go through the periods of time when you're like almost on the brink of it. And when it's like really, really hard. I mean, it's a great, like, that's what I love about endurance sports. Like you kind of selectively get to put yourself in that circumstance and then be like, oh, well, it's not like my livelihood. I'll still be able to feed my family. But like when it comes down to it, like there were times in like we've been open for 5.5 years where I'm literally like, how am I going to, like, what magic am I going to have to do to pay 35 employees? Like, it's like business is great. Everybody's like, you're killing it. And you're like, you don't understand what it takes to actually make it look what it does and to actually make it seem like this easy success. And I think that's part of social media too, is like everything looks really easy and glorious on the surface because we put that shine on it. But the reality is like my husband and I were like, he was going to work at 12:30 in the morning and I was running to work at 2:30 in the morning and we were working until 8 p.m., like those first couple of years. And like people don't necessarily have the will to do that.
When you say glorify failure, what does that mean when you say we glorify failure?
I mean, like we love kind of like that idea of like going through that hard thing, but we don't necessarily like the hard thing like when you're in it. Like we like it as like a plot point, like it's great. Like if you look at like my 100, I'm sure you watched Life in a Day, right? Like the film about my run at Western States. Like
what if I told you that I meant to?
That's fine. Well, a lot of people have seen it or they're going to watch it now. But like, I got to this place where I was like sitting in the chair going to stop, and like it makes for a great story that like I charged to the finish line and came in third. But like, if you really were like in that moment, and like, I think we kind of gloss over it. We like that it exists, but we don't necessarily like want to sit in the discomfort of it and like really know what that's about. Like I love the work of Brene Brown. She talks a lot about that very thing. Like we like that after the fact. We don't really we like to glorify it once it's already gone. But like if you had talked to me since some of those early years, like at the bakery, I'd be like, I'm losing my mind. Like and they're like, aren't you so glad you did this? And you'd be like, no, but I know it's going to be worth it at some point. And,
right. This guy said a great thing. So I've always been pretty big into self-help, ahead of the whatever current curve we're in for it. I mean, just because there's like once upon a time you could only buy the books or go take a course, right? There wasn't 10 gazillion YouTube videos you could pull up or whatever. But I do remember a guy saying, today's breakthrough is tomorrow's ego trip, right? Like, so we can immediately take this thing and be like, oh, well, now I'm all, and I certainly am guilty of it, right? Yeah. Like, this very, I don't know about you, but I think I can also suffer from like that black and white thinking, right? Yeah. This is the worst thing ever. I'm the greatest in the world.
Yeah, pretty much all the time.
Really?
Oh yeah. Like, last week I even had like this, I've been having really great training leading up to attempting to run a PR in the marathon. And like, things have been going like way so good. And then I had this setback where like a nerve, something happened to a nerve in my hamstring. So it's basically like somebody shot you in the leg. And I go from being like, exactly that. Like, I'm going to kill it. Like, I'm going to just shock everybody with how fast I'm going to run to like, I'm never going to run again. Woe is me. What the hell? Maybe I should go to the hospital. Maybe I was like, maybe it's a blood clot. Maybe I'm dying, and I'm like, wow, it doesn't matter how many times I go through it. I still do the same thing. And I'm like, well, it's pretty human.
To just go through these massive swings of.
Yeah. Well, and you're like, when I was thinking about it, I was like, if I look back at my whole career, like there have been times that I've gone through like really dark places, really hard things. But like, it's funny how like, if I were to narrate it, it would always be like, the hard thing wouldn't necessarily be what it would be. I'll be like, look what I did afterwards. It's like last year I had a broken foot and that really sucked because I spent like almost a year trying to figure out what was wrong with my foot. And then it turned out it was broken, but like I won Leadville on a broken foot, you know, and I'm like, cool. Like, and so like the broken foot and all the suffering and all the angst and the 1,000 million trillion doctor's appointments and opinions, like all of that's just kind of like out of the way. So, yeah.
I forgot who was I just talking to. So I interview a lot of people. I listen to a fair amount of podcasts, and you know, I've done a few ultras. I've done World's Toughest, which I know we're definitely going to talk about. And God, who was it that said this? That talks about this was what I still don't know who it was. It was who the hell was I talking? It might have been the guy I was talking to yesterday.
Christian? Was it Christian?
I was going to say, you probably know Christian. As soon as I said that.
I know Christian.
Oh, okay.
I've known him my whole running career, and I don't even know why.
So it's so funny though, because as soon as I said the guy I talked to yesterday, my mind went like, oh, she probably knows Christian because everybody in the ultra world knows Christian. Yeah. So since you know, I'm guessing nothing about me, right?
I don't know very much about you, no.
Okay. I'm guessing other than like you asked Amelia said, yes, he's decent. You should go on a show. I'm guessing that's about the extent of it. Yes.
I didn't even ask Amelia for permission. I just kind of follow you along, and you seem decent enough.
Okay, good. Oh yeah, well right, because you said you wanted to do world stuff, and that's why you first started talking. Okay. So real quick, and those of you relatively newer listeners to my show won't necessarily know this, so it's fine. So my friend says, let's do a Tough Mudder. This is fall of 2011. 10 miles through mud and obstacles may as well have been 100 miles, to Mars, right? I hadn't run a mile since high school, all that shit, right? The typical kind of what turns out to be sort of the 40-year-old midlife crisis. I was probably 39 at the time, whatever it was. And so I start training, for this Tough Mudder. And I fall in love with running right at that sort of peak Born to Run time, right? I read Born to Run. Holy shit, this is amazing. I'm going to do Western States. I'm going to run with the Ramarua in Mexico, right?
Yeah.
And I Google train for a 100-miler, right? And Christian comes right up. Oh my God, this guy lives near me, right? So I was like, hey dude, you don't know me, but you want to go for a run sometime? And he completely brushes me off because that's kind of what you do, I guess. Not necessarily though, because a lot of people hit me up now and I'm usually nice. But, and I think I even saw him in a couple races. And then he wants to do an obstacle race, and he talks to Josue Stevens, right? Who I'm sure you know. Oh, he runs that crazy survival run down in Nicaragua.
Okay, that sounds crazy.
Okay, you haven't heard of that?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so he does ultras, like these awesome destination ultras, but he also does something called survival run, which is kind of half adventure, like here, carry this chicken for the first 2 miles. Then you've never heard of this? Then you climb this amazing volcano with bamboo on your back and this amazing shit that the first 5 years, everybody DNF'd, eventually, right? It's one finisher. I can't believe you haven't heard of this.
Sounds great.
Right. So this guy says, you should talk to my friend Matt. You guys both live in Atlanta. We sit down. We kind of form a fast friendship. We're both super type A, insane. And he actually helped me start this company, the obstacle racing company, and then we've gone our separate ways since. But we're still bros, as it were. But yeah, so Christian now, insane that he is, can't bing, 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 jumping all over the place. He says this daughter has slowed him down a little bit, but I'm not sure. Time will tell. But now he wants to set the Grandmaster's mile record.
That sounds fast and hard.
Well, I asked. It's like he's got to get a minute or two faster. It's really crazy. It's insane. But
there's some fast masters.
It's I think it's 4:20 and his fastest is 4:40. Something huge. I forget what it is. But he's already, of course, has a website for it, and he's trying to get sponsors for it. And that's Christian for you, right?
Oh yeah, he doesn't do anything halfway.
Right. So yeah. I totally lost my train of thought. I think I was talking. Oh yeah. So we were talking about World's Toughest, right? And any endurance event where people quit And the two phrases that I always hear from people, like right when it happens or right after, is, well, I don't have anything to prove, right? Like that's one of the tricks our mind tells us. And I've been there too, right?
Yeah.
The second one that really comes up a lot, and I heard it specifically from my friend Patrick, which of course he regretted the next day, was, well, I'm not having fun anymore, and I do this to have fun, so what's the point? And Christian said, like, are you out of your mind? You think you're going to experience fun for 24 hours of an obstacle race? Like, that's what you need to tell yourself. Because I said, what would you tell people to tell themselves? He's like, you will experience parts of fun, parts of camaraderie, parts of, whatever, glory. But it's going to be a suffer fest, right? It's gonna. Have you seen this, by the way?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
Multiple times.
Okay. That's what you signed up for.
Yeah. You're not gonna. I will say I have had ultra races in which I just it was like somebody shot feel good drugs into my brain for the whole time. And maybe that's what I keep chasing is that perfect day. I had a string of them. When I set the course record at JFK 50 mile, I don't know what it was about that day, but it was just perfect from start to finish. I felt good the whole time. I was happy the whole time. Maybe it was because I had just started dating my now husband, Nathan. So I was just so geeked out on, loved up that made something. But most of the time, even last year when I did Leadville, and I told myself not to have that narrative arc of getting to the crying part in the chair, which you will now experience when you go to watch Life in a Day. Even though I was positive the whole time, at points my brain was still let's quit. I'm I'm winning the race. My brain's just or we could just quit. And I'm it was so funny because even though I was having a good time and my body was holding up and everything was going right, my brain still was just I think I'm tired. I just want to lie down here, and I think sometimes we tell, I've definitely, especially early on in my career, done I'm doing this for fun and I'm not having fun anymore. That nails it right there. And it's if you go in thinking that you're going to have fun for the whole time, you are setting yourself up for failure. And you're giving yourself an excuse, a way to opt out when it does get hard, when the reality is it's going to be great. It's going to be hard. It's going to be great. It's going to be hard. And sometimes the second 100 miler I ever did, I had a 40-mile bad patch, where I was just it was a long time, and it wasn't even that long for me because it was my fastest 100 miler. So it was, significantly shorter than it could be, but it's just and then I came out the other side and crushed it. And if I had given into that, I should feel great all the time mentality, I would have quit. And it would have been easy, and I would have totally, wrote a great blog post about it and how justified I was, and it would have been total bullshit.
What percentage do you think let's talk about winning, the difference between just sort of surviving, which is one thing, and winning, right? Something that you actually set out to do to race at an elite level. What percentage for you is physical and what is mental, and what's good genes?
I think it's a combination of it all. I definitely have to have some good genetic material to work with because I'm a very high adapter. So when I put in a certain stimulus, my body responds to it. So that is if I run 100 miles, I get better. I can do training and get to a place that if somebody else did the same training, they might not have the same thing. I think at this point in my career, it's building up the mentality over time that has really actually made the difference. So especially with a race like Western States, that was hugely mental, and learning how to battle through those bad patches and knowing that I have the skills to get out of the chair. When I did, it was an accumulation of experience, right? If I was young and had never run 100 miles before, I wouldn't necessarily have known that I could have kept going after that point. But it was just like, it's that mental choice to stop giving myself that reason, to stop being like, well, I'm not having fun, or this bad thing happened, or I have nothing to prove. It's like, yeah, I told myself all those things. And then I told myself to, shut the fuck up and keep going.
Well, do you have sort of the, hey, before the werewolves come out conversation with your husband or your crew that's like, look, I'm going to say this and you're going to need to say to me, this safe word or whatever to get me back out there. I assume you've done enough of these that you kind of have that rap.
Oh yeah, I have it's actually funny. There's a scene in Life in a Day when I'm telling my crew exactly that, because I had some people who had never been in an ultra before. Lauren Fleshman, who's one of the greatest distance runners of all time. She was on my crew when I was running for Wazelle, and Sally Bergeson, who was the CEO for Wazelle, they'd never even been a part of an ultra. And so I was like, I am going to come to you like super convincing, like clear-eyed, and tell you I need to stop. And You're going to be like, that's nice, keep going. Because it's true. Like, you are out there in the woods with your own brain doing something hard. You can convince yourself fully that your leg is going to fall off, that you cannot keep going, that, you're the first person ever to throw up in 100-mile race, like whatever. You tell yourself all these things. And the reality is, like, they're all very common things that happen to everybody. And so to have your crew like prepared for when you do that. I mean, last year at Leadville, I didn't know my foot was broken when I started Leadville. I just knew that my foot might hurt. And I told them, if I say I want to quit because my foot hurts, you're like, nah, we ain't giving you a ride. Like, and my foot didn't hurt, but like I had to set it up. And I think that's the importance of having a good team with you, is it's the people who can actually be that mirror and know you well enough to know that you've said, like, this is my goal. This is what I want to do. And this is what's acceptable. And to kind of push back on that. It's actually funny. When I did my second 100-miler ever, I told my crew that, but the person that I had crewing for me, like, can't see me hurting or in pain. So when I said to him, like, I want to stop, he's like, okay, you've given it a good go. And I got so mad because I was like, I told you not to let me quit. And so I got out of the chair and I was just like, ugh. And I went back out and, killed it. So.
Right. Well, yeah. To that point, like, I'm someone that does not have a lot of A races, okay? So when I get to those one or two huge races a year, it's easy for me to say, like, all right, well, it doesn't fucking matter because this is the one that matters. If you're doing a bunch of them, right, this whole, like, risking injury, did nothing foolish, that must be harder to measure. Like, didn't you do, like, Western States and Leadville, like, back-to-back or something crazy like that?
I was going to, but I didn't. I actually I was like training in Leadville, and I decided to pull the plug because I wasn't acclimatizing to altitude, because I live at 0 feet. And when I got to altitude, I was like, just felt like every time I went running, I was like digging myself, like I was just digging my own grave. I was just getting like slower and slower and more tired. But I generally, the way I combat that is I mean, in my career, my ultra running career is now 12 years long. So like I have never raced like less than 10 races in a year, but I usually set out with like goals of like, what are the A races? Like, what are the ones that I'm like, I will go to the mat for? Like Western States, like it was, yeah, I wanted to do really well, but I also had unfinished business with that because I had been on this, I was supposed to do it the year, it was the only year it's ever been canceled. It was supposed to be in my first 100-miler and it was canceled. And then I DNF'd there a couple of years later. And so, yeah, I wanted to crush it, but finishing was one of the goals. And it was important enough that I would pretty much go to the mat for it. There are other races where it's like, if it's, especially with the nature of ultras, sometimes you have to use other races as like a stepping stone to get there. So I generally pick what my A races are so that I don't have that conundrum of like always trying to be on. And like, I do see it now in ultra running is that I mean, I'm not old by any means. I've just been doing this for a long time, but like you see people coming in and they try to A-race everything. And Megan Laws, who has been in the sport much longer than I have, she consistently crushes it at Western States. She's in her 50s and she always comes in the top 10. She calls them visitors to the sport because they come in and they like, they just wow people, but it's unsustainable to race everything, like race 10 times a year and have it all be A races. Like you just can't. And so I've learned over time just to be selective and know, like, even if it comes across like to other people, like everybody thinks I'm just like, I show up at races and people are like, are you going to win? And I'm like, that question annoys me. It's like, I can come to a race with a different goal. But I know like what I'm ready for and capable of. And I try to set myself up in a way that when I get into the race that I don't actually make it harder for myself mentally.
Well, even though I appear to be the only person to have not watched that yet, weren't you already kind of a big deal? Didn't people already know who you were like before this?
Yeah. I mean, at Western States. So it's funny because I've always had the perception that people didn't think of me as like a solid 100-mile racer. Which was kind of true because they're not actually like my favorite distance. So after I did my first 100-miler in 2008, I didn't finish another one until 2015. And the one I did in 2015 was Javelina, which is in Arizona. And that I ran in 14 hours and 52 minutes, which at the time was the third fastest trail 100-mile time for a woman ever. And so like people were like, yeah, that's amazing. But it's kind of, everybody still does that, but how have you done at Western States? Like, it is the one race spot that people, it's like in marathon, it's like the Boston Marathon, like the thing that people look at and say, have you done this? And so for me, it was a way of being like, it's one of the most competitive 100-mile fields. Like, it's relatively local, like it just has a different cachet. And so for me, like I had the perception, whether or not it was actually true, that like people didn't expect much of me in that race. And so like to go there and come in third was a big deal. Even though I've done plenty of things in my career, I have to keep a spreadsheet. I've done so many races. I don't even remember at this point, but yeah, that was just, I don't know, on a different level. It's like with what I expected of myself, but I think it just kind of, and also one of the things that most people don't know is that when we opened the bakery in 2013, I didn't race ultras for a couple of years. It was basically like 2 years. I didn't do any ultras. Cause the 2 a.m. to 8 p.m. days don't leave a lot of time for running around in the mountains. And in that time is when there was a really big surge in it was kind of like this new wave of people coming into the sport. And so I also had gotten married, first part of my career, I was Crosby Helms. And then I got married in 2012. And so when I came back on the scene in 2015, a lot of the younger people didn't really know who I was. And they're like, oh, have you run 100-miler before? And I'm just like, so yeah, so it was just kind of funny, to kind of have this different parts of my career and with the separation of the time that I had to spend opening the business. So.
And you don't feel like you have unfinished business with Western States. You're very happy.
Oh, no. Box checked, done. Don't need to do that again. Not one of those people who finds it it didn't grab me in a way that makes me want to do it over and over again. I feel like there's just so many places I want to run.
Would you feel differently, do you think, if you came in fourth and not third, not on podium?
Well, I mean, at the beginning of that race, I was running in the lead with the girl who ended up winning, and one of my crew members didn't make it to an aid station the first time I was supposed to have crew, and I made big mistakes leaving without enough fuel and stuff. So I made mistakes in that race, so it wasn't perfect, but ultimately to me, it was the way I handled it and the way I ran it down in the second half, it's like I ran true to who I wanted to be and what I wanted to do, so that like it didn't ultimately matter that I was third. Like it was the way that I handled it, and that was enough for me. So if I had handled it and not chased people down, like I think I would be satisfied. I mean, I can't actually answer that question. Maybe I wouldn't be, but like I just feel like it wasn't a perfect day, and I don't really feel like I need to go and see if I can have a perfect day.
Not at that race.
No, I mean, it's just when I look around, like there's just so many different things that I want to do and like experiences that I want to have. Like I want to feel stoked when I pick a race. Like I want to feel like I don't want to feel any level of, I almost don't want to feel mastery. Like I want to feel like a little bit like, I'm not sure I can do this. Like, and I mean, that's why I'm like moving forward, picking different goals. Like kind of now that I've been doing this long enough, I'm like, okay, like I can run Leadville and I live at 0 feet. Like I can run Western States and compete there. Like I've done comrades a bunch of times. Like I know those things. And so now I kind of want to use like my abilities to actually go back to that almost beginner's mindset and challenge myself in a different way. And 100 milers were that for me, you know, for the last couple of years, because like I said, it wasn't really like my favorite distance. So like, I feel like I've kind of ticked that box, and it's not to say I won't, you know, circle back, but I tend to kind of like follow my interests and do a wide range of things.
Right. Well, speaking of which, let's talk about World's Toughest Mudder.
Yeah.
So first of all, do you know that they had started this sort of feeder series last year of 8-hour races, and now they're doing 12 hours? Are you going to do one of those in preparation?
Actually, I was signed up for the NorCal one this year. I was going to do that feeder race and then do World's Toughest Mudder this year. So next year I will do the 12-hour in Vegas, I think is the closest one to me.
Right.
So I will do that. I've already signed up for that.
Awesome.
Just so I can make all my mistakes and only be out there for 12 hours. So I can make new ones in the 24-hour race. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm super excited about that. I wish I could have done it this year. It just, my schedule took some interesting twists and turns.
Right.
So,
I mean, it is relatively close. I'm looking at the calendar. It's October 19th, which is about a month out. Because some people take that one off for that reason. Like some people do the other.
I mean, when I ran my fastest 100-mile time at Javelina 4 weeks before that, I ran the hardest 100K I've ever run, which was Ultra Trail Cape Town. So, I mean, my body's used to that kind of madness.
Cool. Is Amelia going to come out and crew?
I hope so. I am hoping that she's going to be doing Western States this year, and that I'll be able to crew and pace for her. And so I will definitely have that return favor.
I thought, did she get on the wait list? I didn't think she got in.
I'm not. I mean, she can run her way in.
There's still golden tickets available. Oh, okay.
Yeah, the golden ticket races start in January.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, then let's pull for her. Let's pull for her to be there.
Yeah, I really hope she gets there. She was rock star crew for me on her crutches and a couple of years ago. So I feel like she's been wanting to be there for a couple of years, and it's coming.
How's your grip strength?
It has, I mean, I have I wouldn't say I have a long way to go. I started doing CrossFit a month before Leadville. So that's a year and a half ago. And actually I have basically my own CrossFit gym in my backyard. I have a full rig and a shed and everything. So I've been doing things to build up my strength. And I did the Spartan in Utah this year. It was my first Spartan race. And I mean, it was funny because everybody, like all the volunteers laughed at me because every time I was in the elite field, and every time I'd do an obstacle, I would be so stoked. And they're like, but you're elite. Why are you so happy? I was like, I've never done that before. So, I mean, I feel like I have good resources to learn. I don't think I'm glad it's not tomorrow, but I feel like I'm putting in the work now to make it happen. And the thing about World's Toughest Mudder that makes me super happy is that like at least the punishment is more running versus like burpees on ice. I had thought about doing like the World Championship in Iceland because I really want to go to Iceland, and then somebody was like burpees on ice, and I was like, nope, never, can't do that.
Right? Yeah. No, I think it's a super cool like thing, like, but I don't even think Spartan's even going back. I think they're going to Norway or Sweden for the next one, for their next 24-hour race. But yeah, so for the so yeah, I heard you on Heather's show talking about that, how excited you were to get the obstacles for Spartan. Did you see how bloody cold it got this past year in Atlanta? Were you watching from afar?
I watched you from your coverage from afar, and I was just like, amen, so glad I'm not there. My dad actually lives in Atlanta, so I know Atlanta's weather can be interesting, but I was not sad to not have to figure out on the fly how to not only run in a wetsuit, but also like run in a wetsuit when it's so cold outside that the obstacles are all freezing. And like, I'm like, that would be a great recipe for me to really hurt myself.
Yeah, it's a whole new ball game, and I think like we're always hoping more ultra runners come over because we always want to see people like try our thing and fall in love with it, and I don't know, Nicodemus?
Yes, I feel like I do.
So he started out super young, and he was doing unbelievably well. He finished Barkley a few years ago. I want to say the fastest to finish Barkley, maybe. He's an animal, and he came over, and a couple times in a row, he kind of like blew up at that 12-hour mark, and it was kind of a bummer because like that can happen, right? And that's that's what I say to people every year that nobody seems to understand. It's a 24-hour race, not a 12, not an 18, and it happens all the time. So like a lead is never safe, right?
Yeah.
Even a lap or two. I mean, my friend, they didn't have a lot of teams that entered this year, and his team was just like him and a couple friends, and they finished fourth with a ridiculously low mileage because the best teams, a guy got hurt, and so they quit, right?
Yep.
And that happens all the time.
Yeah.
And so I would say prepare yourself as best you can, because I think certainly like grit can translate and the suffering can translate, right?
Yeah.
Like how to suffer, and that's way more important, I think, than even passing the obstacles, because I'm proof that if the weather's right enough, you can survive. And like I got 50 miles a year that I failed almost everything. Not all the ones you could fail, I did, basically. Yeah. So you're talking about 2 or 3 obstacle failures a lap, which, by the way, also mean getting wet. That's the other part that I heard you say on Heather's that I'm like, I want to make sure she knows that. It's not just like, oh, you failed, so go run. It's you're freezing and now you're wet again. And because what they say is like, look, even if you can't do it, you just jump in the water, which you could cheat, and I'm sure people do, but like I always did, like, all right, jump in the water, hop out, do the extra lap. Yeah. And yeah, this year was as cold as it's ever been. And, you saw people who, if you looked at them physically, right, were not the fittest in the world, right? Did your husband just walk in? Did somebody just walk in the room? Oh, you looked distracted for a second.
Oh, no, because the connection got weird for a second. So I was
there are lots of people who, I heard someone who's, twice as fast as I am, maybe 3 times as fast as a lot of people, like, oh, I just don't do well in the cold. It's like, none of us do well in the cold. Like, what are you talking about? Like, and then there's people out there walking, which is even more suffering because you're not warming up by jogging, who just gutted it out. So anyway, hopefully you'll get some good, whatchamacallit,
I mean,
obstacle legs under you.
I have mentally prepared myself to be in a dark place for a long time, and to know that it's probably going to be mentally harder than anything else, because I'll have to keep going over the same ground over and over again. And it's not like suddenly, if you start feeling something, it's not like I don't know. I don't know if you just suddenly start getting good at it again. Like if your grip strength fails, like you're not like, oh, I think I'm fine now that my hands are frozen into my gloves.
It has happened though. People, it hasn't happened to me because I just was like, okay, I'm failing. I'm going to keep skipping it. But then people said you shouldn't, because a lot of times, like, it does come back. Sometimes they close certain obstacles. Your upper body gets a little back. You get the blood flowing, blah, blah, blah. So that I would say in a 12-hour, maybe not, but in a 24-hour, it can happen. But it's a thing. They open obstacles, they close obstacles. But the thing that I say that people that the other part that you never really get till you're in it is something, the simplest thing, like going up and over a wall, which you think isn't as hard as, say, an obstacle with water on you, is that you feel everything. So coming down off of 8-foot wall, you feel every, centimeter of that spring into the ground, up through your leg, up through the rest of your body. It's like you're jumping in slow motion. And that's the part that's like, there's no getting used to other than just freaking doing it. Yeah.
And one of my favorite things that I've learned over my career is that most things that happen, like, and this is why, like, having an experienced person like Amelia on my crew is important to me, is like the idea of working the problem, where it's like, I don't know what to expect and I can prepare myself best as I can. But my ultra experience helps because I have had 40-mile bad patches. I have been sitting in the chair saying I can't go on and then, sprinting down and catching people. So it's like just knowing to have that mentality of like, okay, so these things come up. There has to be, like, it's not a unique experience to me, right? Like, somebody has been through it. Somebody's probably like going through it in the chair next to you, like, to kind of use those resources to find the answer. And it's a matter of like, at this point in my career, I also, going back to the idea of quitting, like, I have a much less, like, a lower tolerance for like what I know is a legit quit. Like, I'm like, I know when I'm bullshitting myself, right? And I know when I'm just like, yeah, I don't want to do this anymore, and I know that I'm going to get to the I don't want to do this anymore point. But like, I also know, having gone through that, like when I did Ultra Trail Cape Town, hardest 100K I've ever done, and it was in the pouring rain, it was freezing, and you're like running over rocks that you can't even see because it's like covered in water. And the whole time I'm just like, every aid station I'm coming in, like just crying and like a total spaz, and everybody's just like, and I was like, I want to quit. Like, I'm not having fun. I don't have anything to prove, blah, blah, blah. Like, and then I just got to this point, I caught the back of the 65K. So I caught the last people who I'm like, 30K ahead of, and they're walking, and I like jog up, and I'm like, I'm just going to walk with you guys for a second. They're like, you're doing amazing. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, no, I'm not. And then they're like, you're killing it. You're in third place, like all this stuff. And I was like, I want to quit. And they're like, but you don't have to, you're doing so well. And I realized, like, I simply had to make the choice to not, like, to take that off the table, because I could have convinced you there was something wrong with me to like make it legitimate. But like, I just wanted to make it to the finish line. And when I stopped entertaining that, it just got easier, because I was like, now I'm just doing everything in my power to get to the finish line. And that's like something that I've tried to harness moving forward, is just not even like considering it unless like my leg is really falling off, or like they're pulling me out of the race because I'm, in some dire danger. Like, instead of like making it this mental thought process, like, just don't even bring that onto the table.
Do you know what else that really works for?
What?
Staying married.
Yes. Amen to that.
Right?
Yeah.
I couldn't help thinking that when you started saying that. I really liked, so I heard you say that, and I know you're not the first person to, but that apply, like, what's the problem, work the problem.
Yeah.
And I heard you say that. I was actually running a half marathon when I was listening to your episode with Heather, and I'm so new. Like, I still have so many problems to like find and solve. I've done. You talk about how many races I do have count, because I started keeping a little Excel spreadsheet 6 years ago. Uh-huh. So I've done. It's like 150 something obstacle races and 170 something total, and most of them at like a B or C race pace. Like I just don't kill myself that often, right? But so now I'm trying to run like my first sub 2 half, which I've never done, right? And it's fun. Like I'm really enjoying it, right? Like if you've done 50 Spartans, sometimes, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, I've carried this bucket a few times, right? Yeah. So I'm trying to do new stuff, right? Get a fast 10K. But it just, like you're immediately going, what you just said, you just go from problem to solution. And once you're in the solution, things turn around pretty quickly. And it gives your mind kind of something to do, right? It kind of like gives you something to do. But I was going to say one more thing about the world's toughest thing. Oh, man. Oh, what the heck were we talking about? Well, what else is on your docket 2019 or 2020 even?
Well, I will be visiting you hopefully in 2020 because I'm attempting to qualify for the marathon trials again. So that's in Atlanta in February.
I've already signed up for the Golden Route, whatever it's called. They're letting us run the course like the week before.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so so cool.
I did the trials in 2012, and that's actually what my marathon PR is.
Which is?
2:38.
And what do you need to get on the Olympic team?
Onto the Olympic team? Or something I will never run.
Oh, okay. So
to qualify for the trials is, for women, it's the B standard is 2:45, the A standard is 2:37. So I'm going for the A. I'm going to try to do the A standard, mostly because I've already been to the trials. Like that as a goal isn't challenging enough for me. Like it doesn't engage me. Like you're talking about carrying the bucket 50 times. Like I need something that's a bit more of a stretch. And so trying to run a PR after 7 years that's a bigger stretch for me, especially considering I've been I did 100 milers for the last couple of years. So like that's a bigger swing. So I'm doing that. I'm doing Comrades again, which for people who don't know is a 56-mile road race. It's the biggest ultra in the world in South Africa. I'm doing my first Ironman in Wisconsin.
So this is 2019.
2019.
So you're going to do your first Ironman. You're going to do World's Toughest. And
I'm going to run a marathon PR. Run Comrades. And then some other things, sprinkled in there.
Right. So you're not...
just not an ambitious year at all.
So, okay, sure. Yeah. So... I was going to say, are you mental?
I might be. I mean, at this point, I don't know.
Okay, let me back up a little bit, though, okay? So, so on Heather's program, I remember you saying, like, I was going to do X, Y, and Z, and then I look back, and that was stupid, because you can't do X, Y, and Z in the same year, right? So, sort of, what's the difference there? Like, are you going to slow jog the Ironman? Like, those aren't easy races.
No, it's the way that I set up the year that it's better. It's just the progression, like the arc of it makes sense versus like what I tried to do this year, which was like decide at the last minute to do like World's Toughest Mudder. And then I had made the 100K national team. So I went to Croatia for World Championships in September, and it's a 100K on the road. And so I basically was doing like road racing, and then I was like, and then trying to shift to World's Toughest Mudder when I had been doing this like period of time where I was doing road racing and like not in the gym and that kind of stuff. That's why I was like, I can't make that shift. But the way that I planned, like I've just planned things out in a way that I have more time to prepare, and knowing that I have more time, like there's things that I can incorporate, say, into Ironman training that will be beneficial, like doing grip strength and things like that I can do over the course of the year, versus like deciding in September to do World's Toughest Mudder and then being like, oh shit, I have no idea what I'm doing.
So when you have these races, do you do like the, A, B, and C goal thing?
Yeah. I mean, and especially since, it's being my first Ironman, I have my goal is to like not drown in the swim, right. Like
good goal.
And, and everybody's like, oh, you're going to be so good at it. And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I'm just I I kind of actually just want to see at this point if I even like it, right? I won't know unless I try. It's kind of the same thing with World's Toughest Mudder. Like, I really enjoyed doing the obstacle course. Like when I did Spartan, I really enjoyed that. But like, I won't know if World's Toughest Mudder is my thing unless I try it. And so I don't necessarily have the mentality, well, I would like to be competitive. I don't necessarily have like a competitive first mentality because I need to learn first what this experience is like in order to then be like, okay, let me like go full on to try to win. It's not to say I'm not going to try to be like I said, like I would love to do that, but I also give myself grace to know that this is going to be a learning experience.
All right. Okay, good. Because I want to say you seem great. I think you're becoming friendly. But, you know, Heather and I are already talking about it, and they're definitely going to ask me many times, right, as we get closer and closer to the event next year, right? And so I'm probably going to say, Deven's going to do well, but she's not going to be in the podium her first time. So
you know, I actually prefer that because I mean, and that was part of the thing, like at Western States, I love to be in the position of the dark horse. Like,
right. It's much more fun.
It's way more fun. And to me, like, I don't actually like the idea of like, I would rather surpass expectation than like not live up to them. So it's like, if you say, meh, you might be fine, good luck, then I'm like, sweet. Yeah, that's going to, you know, that will give me fire in those dark moments to be like, oh, they say I can't do this. Excellent. Now I'm going to show you.
I will say there is one woman who proved me wrong. I don't want you to think it's just women because I say the same thing to men, but I can't even think of her name now, but there's a woman who is also a podcaster and I was like, yeah, you'll do okay. Like, you're not going to, I said top 10 would be phenomenal. And she got second. And I was like, okay, but she also never raced again. So it was kind of a fluke. But anyway, just, I'm sure you prefer to be an underdog, but I just, you know, don't even think I don't like you.
I appreciate the heads up. It was actually funny I didn't know Utah was a championship race this year. And Amelia told me I had to go on the elite field, and I was like, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. And I show up, and I'm like at the back, you know, telling all these girls like how scared I am. I don't even think I can climb over the wall to get to the start line, you know, all this stuff. And Rhea comes up and like fangirls me because she was like, oh my God, you're Deven. You're such an amazing ultra runner. And everybody's like looking at me. And I was like, no, don't. Shh. And then everybody's like, look, I was like, I don't know. She's crazy. I don't know what she's talking about, you know? So I would rather just go in for the experience, and it's going to be what it's going to be. Right. Like,
well, and I think, you know, you'll obviously your experience will be yours, and it's great. I'm excited for you. Like, just first time, like, we love it is, especially it is this community that I'm sure you've heard so much about. And Spartan obviously has a community too, but when you suffer with this group of people, and it truly is a community, the staff, volunteers, the people you're running with, you know, the elites, the regular people, whatever, when you leave this thing, you've got, you know, like so many connections that you've made, so many of those, you know, sort of spot weld moments that this guy helped you over a wall at 1 a.m, or this person gave you their last Cliff Bar, or whatever, you know, whatever it is. So I think you'll totally love that, because that's to me, you know, I just went back and listened to, I had done interviews at the end of World's Toughest that I still hadn't put up yet because I had so much content, and I just listened to it again, and it made me fall in love with the event again. Because they do this great Monday brunch after, where it's kind of like you know, everyone's The Walking Dead, and you're licking your wounds. They do the awards, and sort of a last chance to see everybody. I do want to ask you though, this is when you said you came up on those people. When I'm not doing great at a race and I'm being, you know, sort of lapped, right? If it's a looped race or there's an out and back, and like the people who are way ahead of you are like, good job, keep going. And I'm always like, fuck you. You like, I get mad at them. But then I do want to say that to people, right? If I'm in an obstacle race and I'm passing someone that's clearly suffering, and I'm like, you doing okay? Like, keep it up. And then I'm just like, do they resent me? Like, what, where do you stand on that?
You know, I one of the coolest things that people said about me at Leadville was that I acknowledged it's an out and back. And I acknowledged I was like, actually, as I'm passing the majority of the field, which is quite big for a 100-mile race, I was actually about to catch first place. So like, I'm in the most competitive part of my race. And I'm still like, you're doing great. You're doing great. You're doing great. And like people, like, I feel like to me, I'm acknowledging what you said, like that we're all in this experience together and we're all chasing after our own goals. And so I feel like I want to say that to everybody. And I really love when people encourage me. And as somebody who is out front, I don't think that just because somebody's slower than me that they should say good job to me and I shouldn't say it to them. Like that would be a total dick move.
I just meant more like when people say it, if I'm having a bad race, my first thought is they're only saying that because they think they're supposed to and they don't mean it. Which now that I say so, it just seems ridiculous that I'm saying that.
I mean, I definitely have in my head and probably out loud said some things when people are like, when I'm having a bad day and they'll be like, you're doing great. And I'll be like, no, I'm not. I suck. But, that's just part of being in a bad patch.
All right. Well, is there anything you want to plug? Sponsors, website, your bakery?
I can plug the fact that I don't have any sponsors for next year. My contracts are up. So so no sponsor plugs. If you come to the Bay Area, you should come to my bakery. It's MH Bread and Butter. It's in San Anselmo, which is north of San Francisco.
Well, my wife is from the Bay Area. And we travel a fair amount, not as much lately because we have too many damn kids and it's expensive to fly with so many of them. What happened to your sponsor? Did you make somebody mad at Oiselle? Weren't you? Or whoever else you had?
I left Oiselle in June. I ended my contract with them. It was just time and for a lot of reasons. Hoka, my contract with Hoka was up at the end of this year, and they didn't offer me what I had been the same. They didn't offer me the same. They're contracting their team, so because my contract was up, they're like basically just didn't offer me a deal that I wanted to continue with. So there goes my major sponsor. But I've, like I said, I've been doing this for so long that I also want to make sure that when I have a sponsorship, like a partnership, that it actually feels super positive. So like Hoka was like, sure, you can continue and we'll give you product only. And I'm like, I don't need that at this point in my life.
Well, so, okay, I don't want to, that's like such a whole nother question, right? The sponsorship world. But I guess it would be what their ask is. If they're saying, we're not going to ask you much anymore, but we'll still give you the shoes and you just do a post once in a while or whatever, then who cares?
The ask would be the same.
Oh,
and that's
well then no.
The problem. Yeah, exactly. I'm like, I basically said, so you want me to do the same amount of work, but for no money? And they're like, yes. And I'm like, no.
Right, exactly. But that's right, exactly. And sadly, right, there are a lot of people that will, right?
Yes.
But obviously you get what you pay for and you get whatever level you want. Although I do know them, like they seem to be pretty solid. Like they have like Wardian, right, who I like a lot.
But they also, if you look,
the ghost of Hoka hung up on us.
Hoka was like, no. They've had a historically very big team.
Oh, okay.
Right? And that's, as with most teams who have that big of a team, at some point, like
somebody looks at the bottom line and goes, what are we giving her all that money for?
Yeah, exactly. And, for me, the sponsorship thing is actually looking exactly at what you just said, like, what is the ask and like, what is the give? And I am very much about a partnership and I'm willing to do my part, but there are sponsorships in the sport where the ask is huge and it's like incongruous with what, like, they'll be like, I'll give you this tiny travel stipend, but you have to race 12 times in a year. And you're like, I'm racing for belt buckles. Like, how am I supposed to do that? Right. Well, I'm sure Amelia's told you that the OCR world is still figuring out what the heck it's doing in that world. But at least you have prize money.
Well, there you have it. Hope you enjoyed that little chat we had several weeks ago. It wasn't that long ago. It was over the bloody holiday. I can't remember. Anyhow, hope you enjoyed it. You can check her out. Fast Foodie is her Instagram handle, and she's easily Googleable to find lots of other stuff. And I will definitely be interviewing her as we approach, or maybe at World's Toughest 2019. Man, that seems far away. How is your post-winter break thingy going? Still in hibernation mode? Still eating a lot? I was until recently. Getting out for some nice runs now. Well, I never really stopped running, but you know what I'm saying. Anyhow, my first race back looks to be Jacksonville, everybody. Who's going to Jacksonville Spartan? First big race of the year. Lots and lots of great stuff coming your way. I'm so glad you joined me. If you want to be part of the cool Patreon club, we've got our own Facebook group. We do some special stuff there. Come join the Patreon, patreon.com/obstacle racing media. Lots of giveaways. You win really, really cool stuff. All right. Love you, miss you, mean it. I have got to run.